Good morning. This is your daily briefing from the New York Times. Today's headlines for Saturday, July 25, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a great deal to cover today, from a stunning security breach involving Air Force One and a widening war in the Middle East, to domestic politics, a shifting economy, and a cultural landscape that feels, increasingly, like it's being rewritten in real time. Let's begin. We start with a story that reads like a thriller but is, in fact, a sobering account of presidential security in a time of escalating conflict. During the NATO summit in Turkey this month, President Trump was forced to abruptly switch aircraft before flying home. He had arrived on a new Boeing 747-8, a jet donated by Qatar, a gift that has already drawn scrutiny because it lacks the advanced defensive countermeasures of the standard Air Force One fleet. But while the president was on the ground in Ankara, intelligence officials intercepted what they judged to be a credible threat. Iranian proxy forces were targeting the president and that specific aircraft. The Secret Service, taking no chances, urged Mr. Trump to depart instead on the older, hardened Air Force One. The plane swap was executed quietly, but it raises profound questions about the security of the Qatari jet, which the administration has been eager to put into service, and about the reach of Iranian-linked networks even inside a NATO ally's territory. It's a stark reminder that the conflict the president has called a short excursion has now dragged on for nearly 5 months with no end in sight, and it's touching the presidency itself. Which brings us directly to the Situation Room. On Friday, President Trump convened his top advisors and senior cabinet members to decide whether to significantly escalate the U.S.-Israeli military campaign against Iran. The meeting came at what officials describe as a potential inflection point. A fragile ceasefire has collapsed. A memorandum of understanding meant to bring Washington and Tehran back to the negotiating table for long-term denuclearization has unraveled. The president has long insisted this would be a brief operation. Nearly 5 months later, the White House is weighing options that could deepen American involvement dramatically. The deliberations are reportedly intense, with some advisors warning of uncontrolled escalation in a region where key shipping lanes are already disrupted and oil has surged past $100 a barrel. The president's frustration is said to be mounting, but so are the risks of a wider war. And if the week abroad was fraught, the evening at home offered its own kind of turbulence. Friday night, President Trump took the stage at the White House Correspondents' Association dinner, or rather, a redo of it, held at the Waldorf Astoria, the former site of the Trump International Hotel. The president opened by asking, "What do we do here? Is this supposed to be fun? Am I supposed to be serious? Am I supposed to be a comedian?" He promised a little bit of everything, and delivered an hour of meandering, ad hominem attacks on political enemies, scripted jabs at the press corps, and a performance that underscored just how fractured the relationship between this administration and the media has become. Reporters in the room described the atmosphere as tense, the laughter often forced. It was, in many ways, a distillation of the moment, a president who treats the norms of the office as optional, a press corps under sustained assault, and a public spectacle that felt less like a tradition than like another front in an ongoing war. Let's turn overseas. In Taiwan, the concern is not rhetoric but physical survival. As armed Chinese government ships expand their patrols around the island, officials in Taipei are urgently testing how they would keep fuel and other vital imports flowing if Beijing attempted a blockade. Taiwan relies on imports for about 95% of its energy. Natural gas alone fuels half its power generation. Chinese naval and air forces have been rehearsing moves that could seal off access to the island, a scenario that would strangle Taiwan's economy and military within weeks. The global shocks from the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz have only sharpened the focus. Taiwan is now stepping up plans to secure alternative supply routes, stockpile reserves, and harden its ports. It's a race against a timeline nobody can see but everyone in Taipei feels. In Argentina, a different kind of reckoning. After their national team's decisive defeat in the World Cup final and tears from Lionel Messi, Argentines faced what felt like an enormous wave of global criticism over racist chants and aggressive behavior by some players and fans. Many Argentines condemned the conduct unequivocally. But they also rejected what they saw as a sweeping stigmatization of their entire nation. In Rosario, at the National Flag Memorial, supporters gathered not just to mourn the loss but to push back against a narrative that felt, to them, reductive and hypocritical. The conversation there is about accountability, yes, but also about who gets to define a country by its worst moments. And in a quieter but symbolically charged moment, the Gordie Howe International Bridge between Windsor, Ontario, and Detroit finally opened on Friday after a delay ordered by President Trump and the imposition of new tariffs against Canada. When Canada and Michigan agreed to build this multi-billion-dollar span at the busiest US-Canada crossing, the relationship was dramatically different. In 2012, President Obama was widely admired in Canada. The nations cooperated on border security and defense. The bridge was named for Gordie Howe, the Canadian hockey legend who played 25 seasons with the Detroit Red Wings, a gesture of kinship. Now, with tariffs in place and trust eroded, the opening ceremony was muted. Americans were essentially told to stay home. A bridge built for connection stands as a monument to a partnership that has frayed. Back in Washington, the president has turned his attention to the Smithsonian. On Friday, Mr. Trump ordered warning signs and exhibits installed outside the National Museum of American History, declaring that the museum does not, in his view, accurately reflect American history. The directive, issued by executive order, escalates a dispute fueled by a 162-page White House report that accused the museum's director, Anthea Hartig, of radical activist ideology and the institution of undermining the country's founding principles. The museum, one of the most visited in the world, now faces the unprecedented prospect of government-mandated disclaimers at its own entrance, a move that historians and free speech advocates call a dangerous politicization of public history. Even as the ceasefire with Iran collapses, American universities are pressing ahead with their Middle East campuses. Cornell, Northwestern, and others expect to hold classes as usual this coming semester in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, and a new outpost is on track to open in Saudi Arabia. These programs have long been a fixture of U.S. higher education's global reach. But the war meant the spring semester was defined by shutdowns, evacuations, and emergency online instruction. Now, with the conflict intensifying, administrators are hoping, perhaps simply betting, that the region will remain stable enough for academic life to continue. It's a gamble with students' safety and institutional credibility on the line. In Houston, a devastating postscript to an immigration enforcement action. The Harris County District Attorney's Office has confirmed that small bags found in the van of Lorenzo Salgado Araujo, a 52-year-old immigrant shot and killed by an ICE agent during a traffic stop earlier this month, did not contain drugs. Federal officials had initially claimed the white powder could be methamphetamine and used that belief to obtain a search warrant. The lab results came back negative. Mr. Salgado Araujo's death is one in a string of fatal encounters as the administration ramps up its immigration crackdown. The discrepancy between the government's justification and the forensic evidence is now part of an ongoing investigation. At the Justice Department, a leak investigation has taken a highly unusual turn. In a Manhattan federal courtroom, Judge Arun Subramanian sharply questioned prosecutors about why they had issued subpoenas to New York Times reporters, typically a final step in leak probes, just 2 days after the publication of an article about the Air Force One threat. The judge's remarks cast a spotlight on two administration officials under consideration for powerful cabinet posts, Todd Blanche and Jay Clayton. The hearing revealed that the department had reversed its own internal process, bypassing the usual requirement to exhaust other investigative avenues before targeting journalists. The implications for press freedom and the independence of the Justice Department are immediate and serious. At the FDA, an advisory panel has voted to endorse broader use of 6 unproven peptides, a decision that could open the floodgates for a multi-billion-dollar industry of lightly regulated compounding pharmacies. These pharmacies, which traditionally mix customized medications for individual patients with specific needs, have grown into a commercial pipeline for wellness and telehealth companies selling unapproved drugs. The peptides in question lack rigorous clinical trial data for the wide range of conditions they're marketed to treat: anti-aging, weight loss, athletic recovery. Critics warn the vote effectively legitimizes a backdoor route to market for products that have not been proven safe or effective. The FDA must now decide whether to follow the panel's recommendation. And in a moment that blended sports, race, and personal grievance, President Trump was asked in the Oval Office to weigh in on the debate between LeBron James and Michael Jordan. His response: LeBron is, maybe he's a racist. Maybe he doesn't like Trump, I don't know. But I only like people who like me, so I would say Michael Jordan all the way. James, who just announced he'll sign with the Philadelphia 76ers at age 41, has been critical of the president in the past. The remark fits a pattern. The president has repeatedly lashed out at black athletes who challenge him, framing their dissent as personal hostility rather than political conscience. The global economy, already jolted by an oil shock, is now getting a tariff reminder. President Trump has unleashed a new blitz of punitive tariffs on allies and rivals alike, straining trade, rattling bond markets, raising prices, injecting uncertainty. But this time, the context is fundamentally different. the United States is at war with Iran, key energy routes in the Persian Gulf are blocked, and Brent crude is hovering near $100 a barrel. When Mr. Trump unveiled his original sweeping tariffs in April 2025, oil was around $70. Now, the inflationary pressure of tariffs compounds the supply shock of war. Economists warn of a vicious cycle. Higher energy costs feed inflation, which prompts central banks to keep rates high, which slows growth, all while supply chains are being rewired by geopolitical fracture. In Hollywood, the Paramount-Warner Brothers Discovery merger, an $11 billion deal that would reshape the media landscape, has hit another delay. Paramount agreed Friday to freeze the merger until June 2027 at the latest, while a federal judge in California considers a lawsuit from state attorneys general seeking to block it. The deal has already weathered regulatory scrutiny, shareholder lawsuits, and leadership turnover. This latest pause extends a shorter freeze imposed earlier this week. The merger agreement expires in August 2027. If the litigation drags on, the whole structure could collapse. And in a stunning admission buried in court documents, the Trump administration has acknowledged that it canceled more than $7.5 billion in Biden-era clean energy grants to states based solely on whether they backed President Trump in the 2024 election. When the grants were terminated in October, the White House framed it as a necessary corrective to protect taxpayers from waste. But federal officials, in little-noticed filings this month, admitted the decisions were purely politically targeting projects in states represented by Democrats that voted for Kamala Harris. The revelation has sparked outrage and legal challenges, but also a broader question: how many other funding streams are being quietly weaponized? In Silicon Valley, Meta is spinning off Facebook Marketplace into a standalone app called Seller. 10 years after noticing millions of users buying and selling on the platform, Meta built Marketplace into one of Facebook's most popular features, essentially the internet's largest garage sale. Now, Seller will let merchants manage listings, payments, and shipping separately. It's part of a broader strategy to innovate on the original social network. In May, Meta launched a similar standalone app for Reels. The question is whether unbundling features revives engagement or simply fragments an aging user base. In New York City, a series of stabbings on the Upper West Side has shaken the Jewish community and ignited a fierce political debate. On Thursday, Moshe Grunhaus was leaving the Jewish Center in Manhattan when he was stabbed in broad daylight. The suspect, Raul Morales, was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder as a hate crime. He allegedly first stabbed an Asian man, Chak Sung, then attacked Mr. Grunhaus, who was wearing a yarmulke, yelling Allahu Akbar during both assaults. Some politicians argued that Mayor Zoran Mamdani's criticism of Israel had created a dangerous environment. The mayor pushed back forcefully, condemning the stabbings and defending his statements as advocacy for human rights, not incitement. The incident has become a flashpoint in a city already on edge over anti-Semitism and the politics of the Gaza war. At the same time, the head of the city's powerful teachers' union has threatened all-out war against Mayor Mamdani if he doesn't support one-time bonuses of $10,000 for teaching assistants, paraprofessionals who are among the lowest-paid workers in the public school system. Mamdani pledged on the campaign trail to back the legislation. But the union boss says the mayor has gone silent since taking office. The standoff threatens to fracture an alliance between the Democratic Socialist mayor and organized labor that was central to his victory. On a different front, Mayor Mamdani announced a $43 million commitment to the Bureau of Coastal Resilience, the agency responsible for operating more than 100 floodgates slated to protect Lower Manhattan from the next Hurricane Sandy by 2027. The gates are being built, but until now, there was no money to maintain and operate them. As climate change accelerates, so too must our efforts to protect our communities, the mayor said. It's a significant down payment on a problem that will only grow. In the arts, our critics have been busy. Victoria Monet channels 90s girl group energy on Reach Out, layering confident vocal harmonies over a prospective Come On. Sam Smith ratchets up the drama on Oh Mother, backed by the full-throated two-city chorus and a distorted guitar, belting I Have Been Betrayed. And Chad Hugo, one half of the Neptunes, re-emerges with a new track that reminds you of his quiet architectural genius. Meanwhile, Charli XCX has released music, fashion, film, her follow-up to the cultural juggernaut Brat. Our reviewer calls it a proudly prickly, satisfyingly scuzzy album that embraces, even glorifies, the slapdash, a deliberate, messy refusal to polish the successor to a phenomenon. It's a performance piece about fame, insecurity, and the impossibility of topping yourself. And in a grim courtroom in Los Angeles, a detective testified on the 4th day of the preliminary hearing for the singer D4VD, accused of fatally stabbing 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez and dismembering her body. The detective described photographs of the two performing sex acts and text messages discussing birth control, pregnancy, and abortion when she was 13 and 14 and he was 18. The testimony laid out a relationship that was exploitative and illegal long before it turned lethal. The case has horrified the music industry and raised urgent questions about power, age, and accountability in a world where young artists can be catapulted into stardom with no guardrails. In books, a remarkable discovery. A Cambridge professor has transcribed a handwritten short story Alan Turing wrote in the year before his death, revealing a playful, creative side of the mathematician known for cracking Enigma and fathering modern computing. The story, whimsical and self-aware, shows Turing experimenting with narrative form, a reminder that even the most rigorous minds need room to play. Meanwhile, our book review team has published its annual mid-year check-in, debating the titles they can't stop thinking about, a conversation that spans fiction, non-fiction, poetry, and the strange, quiet books that linger. And for younger readers, two picture books, Bored and Endless Afternoons, offer a radical proposition that boredom is not a curse but a blessing, the spark of imagination, the space where childhood actually happens. In food, Coca-Cola's new brand identity has sparked an unexpected comparison. The soda giant introduced a new typeface meant to unify its look across 200 global markets, but online observers immediately spotted its resemblance to the font used on Marlboro cigarette packs. Soda is the new cigarette, joked some. Font nerds delve into the kerning, the weight, the historical lineage. The company insists it's a coincidence. The internet remains unconvinced. On a more practical note, Melissa Clark writes that mild, light ground chicken cheap, quick cooking pairs beautifully with cumin and green beans for the best weeknight stir fry. And in Corbin, Kentucky, where the Colonel's empire began, they're auctioning off the home, the restaurant, and maybe even the secret spice mix of Harlan Sanders, a cantankerous innovator whose legacy is now a collector's item. In science, SpaceX stuck the landing on the second test of its newest Starship design, the 13th test overall, but only the second for version 3, which incorporates major performance and reliability upgrades. The flight deployed Starlink satellites, corrected problems from the May attempt, and ended bobbing intact in the Indian Ocean. "We're really pumped about this," said SpaceX engineers. The success is a boon for NASA's Artemis moon program and for Elon Musk's vision of deploying 1 million data centers in orbit. And in a lab, researchers have devised an enzyme that can reverse the buildup of advanced glycation end products AGEs, the sticky, rigid compounds that accumulate in tissues over decades and drive heart disease, kidney failure, eye damage, and diabetes. The same chemical reaction that browns a cake is aging your body at 98.6 degrees. This enzyme, in early studies, appears to undo some of that damage. It's a long way from a treatment, but the mechanism is tantalizing. In public health, a voluntary recall of 19 million eggs produced in Texas and sold under multiple brand names in 6 states has been linked to nearly 100 salmonella cases across 17 states, with 26 hospitalizations and no deaths reported. The illnesses began in November 2025 and continued through June 2026. Separately, the CDC has expanded a cyclosporiasis outbreak linked to iceberg lettuce to 9 states: Illinois, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Pennsylvania, joining Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Nearly 2,000 people have been sickened, 98 hospitalized. The FDA has traced the lettuce to Taylor farms, grown in central Mexico. And measles cases in the U.S. have hit a new record, 2,318 confirmed cases so far this year, surpassing last year's high of 2,200. More cases in the last 2 years than in all the years from 2000 through 2024 combined. Vaccination rates are waning. The disease, declared eliminated in 2000, is re-establishing itself. On Instagram, a new travel trend has security experts deeply concerned. Accounts documenting risky, cross-continental journeys, hitchhiking through conflict zones, crossing borders illegally, sleeping in abandoned structures, are proliferating. The content is riveting, the engagement massive. But the risks, kidnapping, arrest, violence, death, are real, and the platforms have no mechanism to intervene. It's travel porn with a body count waiting to happen. In real estate, the House Judiciary Subcommittee on the Administrative State, Regulatory Reform and Antitrust has summoned Compass, the world's largest real estate brokerage, and Midwest Real Estate Data, a major listing service, to answer questions about their partnership. The inquiry comes as Compass's legal battle with Zillow continues. Lawmakers want to know whether the relationship stifles competition, inflates commissions, or locks consumers out of data. Meanwhile, in gentrifying neighborhoods across the South, for-profit housing groups like Ascent Housing are buying apartment complexes and deliberately lowering rents, sometimes by $500 a month, by attracting investors who accept modest returns in exchange for social impact. It's a market-based experiment in affordability. And if you have $1 million and a dream of Costa Rica, our real estate section has 3 villas in the running, in Hatillo, Punta Leona, and Portosal, each with pool terraces, rainforest access, and a different flavor of paradise. In fashion, or really, in automotive luxury, some drivers are no longer satisfied with parking garages. They're buying car condos, climate-controlled, custom-finished units with wet bars, libraries, mezzanines, and 75-inch screens. Jack Griffin, 81, former race car driver, owns a double unit in Carrollton, Texas. He doesn't live there. 11 of his 12 Porsches do. It's housing for horses that run on gasoline. We lost 2 figures from American entertainment this week. Chuck Russell, director of The Mask and A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors, died at 74. His work, including the remake of The Blob, was known for brash, practical visual effects that launched Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz into the stratosphere. And Freddie Cannon Boom Boom, the rocker whose raw voice powered Palisades Park and Tallahassee Lassie, the latter based on a poem by his mother, died at 89 in Oxnard, California. He recorded his last song just months ago. He once said, "I'm not any of those," meaning the clean-cut teen idols of his era. "I'm a rock and roller." In the magazine, Charles Homans examines the difference between ordinary influence peddling and the First Family's outright self-enrichment. The minimum estimate for what President Trump earned in his first year back in office, $2.2 billion, 3.5 times the family's 2024 earnings, largely from cryptocurrency ventures launched just before his administration throttled federal oversight of the industry. The piece asks a bracing question: how much is the American presidency worth? And in a lighter vein, a ruling on a theater etiquette dispute: is it okay to shout at the movies? The answer, unsurprisingly, is no, but the reasoning is delightful. Finally, the opinion section. Joanna Novak, a poet and professor, confesses she might be a tradwife, not the performative internet kind, but the kind who finds sanity in domestic rituals, frontier chores, and the quiet rhythm of making a home. Reed Walker, a citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Iroquois Nation, writes that land acknowledgements are infuriating not because conservatives critique them in good faith, but because they become a hollow ritual that lets institutions feel virtuous without returning land or power. Michelle Goldberg argues that Christopher Nolan's Odyssey proves epics are better without AI, that viewers long for the visceral, the human, the imperfect, now that eye candy is cheap. Ezra Klein sits down with Morris Katz, the strategist who helped Zoran Mamdani win and then tried to replicate it for Graham Plattner, whose campaign imploded amid allegations he denies. What did Katz learn? Keith Ferrazzi discovers his AI agent nailed his co-workers' worst habits and realizes that using AI well at work is really about using the same skills that make you a good manager. And Rachel Louise Snyder visited the pop-up exhibition of the Epstein Files, 3,437 bound volumes, 3.5 million pages, and asks how we hold accountable the web of accomplices who enabled his crimes. That's your briefing for Saturday, July 25, 2026. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day brings.